Our next speaker has the global outlook at the situation right now. He turned his company into the fastest growing food company of the world in his tenure as CEO. Today, he chairs the very same company that operates in more than 194 countries and have more than 340,000 people employed. He'll now share his insight on the next 12. Please welcome the CEO of Nestlé, Peter Brabeck-Letmathe. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, after Beautiful and Fast and James Bond and luxury, here comes somebody and talks about bouillon cubes and coffee and condensed milk and I don't know what. That's quite a different subject. However, I must say one thing I learned, and I was very happy. I happen to be also the chairman of Formula One company. And it was good news to hear that Aston Martin will join finally Formula One and give Red Bull a good engine so that they can win again. So that was good news, I must say. Andy, I really enjoyed this one. The theme that I was supposed to talk to you today was about the next 12 minutes. Well, I hope next 12 minutes you're over with me. Frankly speaking, next 12 days, the next 12 years maximum. And all of this really does not fit very much in the DNA of the company that I have the honor and the pleasure to chair. We talk about very long term. We are celebrating 150 years of company history. And I was looking for something that was 12. And the 12 years at least, which for us are relatively short term, are I have been the CEO of this company for 12 years, and I have been the chairman of this company for 12 years. So that's the shortest thing that I can offer you in the 12. So you can see longevity is part of our DNA, and it's extremely important. And one of several reasons why perhaps we have been so longevity-oriented is that we always had a red thread. And it has been, it is, and hopefully it will be the future. And this is focusing on what really matters. And I think there are very few things that is worthwhile focusing. One is to have a compelling vision, and Andy mentioned this also. I thought it was quite interesting. The foundation and the cement of the company has to be described, who you are, what you believe in. Very important for me is belief, what your values are, what your principles are, and where you want to take this company, where you want to go. And this vision doesn't have to be static, it has to be dynamic, and I will come back to this later on. The second one is focus on people. Our people are not only the company's most important assets. I would say the company is our people. That's it. If you take away these 340,000 people, there's nothing left. At the fast-moving consumer good company, of course, we are also brand builders. And brands for the fast-moving consumer company is the way how we can create quality and trust, which are the two fundamentals for any consumer good company. And last but not least, I will take you through how we make Nestlé relevant to the society, not only relevant to our shareholders. On the shareholder side, I can say that in our case, at least for 150 years, we have been quite profitable. And for the last 40 years, we have been increasing our dividend every single year to our shareholders. But how did everything start? Basically, it was a vision of several people, entrepreneurs at the time, 150 years ago, to make nutrition relevant and accessible and available to the city dwellers. And what you can see over 150 years is the importance of innovation. Whether this is technology innovation, like, for example, when in 1866 the first sweetened condensed milk factory was created in Cham, or whether it is scientific innovation, which was the case when Henri Nestlé, who was a political refugee coming from the Frankfurt Revolution, he had to fly Germany, and Switzerland opened the doors for political refugees at that time, quite big. And he made the scientific revolution and developed the first infant formula product. I think the learning I take, and you can see here other parts of revolution, of innovation, what I take out is not only is innovation extremely important, but good innovations, they do not hold focus groups, and they do not ask people what they want. At least when I started in the company, this was the way market research was being defined. I think the real innovator, they tell the people what they are going to want next. That's clear innovation. And one aspect about innovation which one should never forget is that timing is extremely crucial for innovation. An opportunity, a commercial opportunity, is like sunrise. If you wait too long, you just missed it. Now, I took over in 1997 as CEO, and I inherited the most successful food and beverage company that was there. So it was quite a big challenge, because when you become a CEO and you have a company in crisis, I always said that's easy. But if you take over a company that is already extremely successful, world leader in its sector, then the challenge is much bigger. And I gave the company a new vision. And the vision that you can see here is we want to grow from the respected and trustworthy food company that we are known as now, back in 1997, into a respected and trustworthy food, nutrition, and wellness company. Why did I change the vision? It was very simple. I analyzed basically the last 150 years, and what you could see is that the food industry as such, of course, had as a firm prime responsibility to assure sustenance, just to make food available to those new social class which were factory workers, who didn't have the possibility to grow their own food like their parents did when they were still living out in the countryside. So the first role was really to assure sustenance. And this was about a role for about 100 years. Then came the Second World War, and you can see then afterwards new demands from the consumer came. Convenience became much more important. Pleasure, diversity became more important. And that took us about to 1990, 1995. And then something else happens, which I will talk a little bit later on. But the expectations from the consumers to the food and beverage industry changed again. Interestingly enough, I put them afterwards, these development cycles against the income cycle. And you can see very clearly that as income increases, disposable income increases, the demand from the consumer moves from the sustenance towards more the convenience, towards the pleasure and diversity. So from a good food company, we move to become a good food, good life company. And that's quite a difference. And when you look at the development, you can see this in this chart here. In 1997, I created, based upon this, a nutrition strategic business development. Some years later, I moved it, and I convinced my board and my company that we should become the world-leading nutrition, health, and wellness company. We then set up a globally managed business, and then afterwards we started to make acquisitions in order to become what it is just now, with the latest creation that we did, which was in 2014, the Nestle Skin Health, offering nourishing solutions for the skin, and hence opening further dimension between nutrition and health. I mentioned before that there was something happening in 1995, something that most people, also those from market research, did not realize. And I think it's best shown in this chart here. You see, life expectancy in 1800 in Europe was 32 years. 32 years. And since then, the caloric intake of the population increased through and thanks to the food industry, which made food available in a safe form. And you can see how proportionally, with the adequate food intake and caloric intake, life expectancy had been increasing during all these years. It was not the only reason why life expectancy, of course, increased. The advances in hygiene, in pharmacy, in medicine, etc., of course, it also. But there is a clear relationship that when you don't have sufficient caloric coverage, your life expectancy is suffering. But then in 1995, and I say 1995, reality it was not this 1 year, it was in this period, something happened that changed completely the paradigm of the industry. And that was that for the first time, when you started to take more calories, your life expectancy didn't increase, your life expectancy started to decrease. That's a huge paradigm. That changes the whole industry. Because you cannot grow your company anymore with the old paradigm, because basically you lead to chronic diseases like overweight, diabetes, and things like this. You have to change, and the change comes that it is not more calorie, it is better calories, less and better calories. So that was very important. I just wanted to show you that how a single event can change a whole industry and the rules of the whole industry. Let me very shortly talk people. I talked about the importance of people, and we employ, as was mentioned, about 340,000 people directly, about 1.2 million of people indirectly, if I take into account all of our service partners that we have in the world. The most important thing, if you want to manage these 1.5 million people, is that you are capable of aligning them behind the same values and the principles. That's the important part. That's the social knit of a company that you have. So when I became CEO, I wrote those Nestle management and leadership principles, which were the guidelines, if you want, for all of our people all over the world. The other thing, one of the things which is mentioned in this management and leadership principles is that it is people, products, and brands which are decisive for this company, not processes and systems and bureaucracy. I think the success that we have had over all those years was that the company was always able, very pragmatically, to adapt to the new external circumstances, but at the same time, it adhered to the same set of values and principles that it has now for 150 years. Products and brands, I mentioned this. And I mentioned also that at Nestle we are brand builders. We own about more than 2,000 different brands in hundreds of different product categories. And again, it requires to focus on the most important part. Those brands, all of them, they need attention into investments, R&D resources behind them. And then we have established a brand pyramid which allows you to situate and to see when head office, for example, has to intervene in a brand and when you can decentralize this completely. If you have a purely local brand, like, for example, Stauffer, which is a big brand, about 5 billion turnover, but it is a local brand, it's only in the US, you can decentralize the brand handling. If you talk about worldwide brands like Nescafé or Nestlé, of course, or Purina, those brands have to be handled from the center. What really matters here again is to assure that of the more than 1.2 billion products that we sell every day, not every year, every day, 1.2 billion of products, our consumers get the highest level of quality and safety that they expect from Nestle. Because at stake is a trust they have been gratifying us with over the past 150 years. And perhaps the last issue which I wanted to mention on what really matters is that we at Nestle recognize our role as an important actor of the society, but not in a philanthropic sense. It is about now 10 years that we were all together in Davos, and the one subject was corporate social responsibility, and the one phrase which was on everybody's lips was, we have to give back to society. And after 5 days of listening, we have to give back to society, I stood up and said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very sorry. I have nothing to give back to society because I have not been stealing anything from society. I have created value by doing what we are doing responsibly. We have been creating value for the society. And there was our friend Porter in the room, Michael Porter in the room, and then afterwards we started to talk to each other. And he picked up the idea and we started to develop a concept which has become now worldwide known, which is creating shared value, and which you can see here. So let me summarize. Focusing on what really matters, I think, is quintessential for the success, for the long-term success of any company. You have to have a compelling vision. You have to align the values and the principles of your people. In our case, in a fast-moving consumer goods company, you have to be able to be a brand builder, to put sufficient innovation and renovation behind, but also you have to become relevant to the society. Only if you're able to be relevant to the society will you also be able, in the long term, to create value for your shareholders. So what is the role of the leader of such a company? Well, I summarize it very simple. I say within a world of constant change, the role of the leader is to maintain order. But within this order, ladies and gentlemen, it's also his role to assure constant change. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your view on Nestlé, and congratulations on Nestlé's anniversary. When I was doing my research, I could see that soon you have an anniversary yourself. You actually joined Nestlé in 1968. That's 48 years. Why did you devote most of your working life to Nestlé?
Because I think it's the best choice I have ever done. I mean, there is no doubt that at least one of our values and principles is, first of all, we are all at the service of our company, and not the company at the service of its CEO or of its chairman. Once you have accepted this principle that we are at the service of our company, you have a long-term commitment. I always feel it very strange when I hear a new CEO coming into an organization and trying to build up for him a platform using this company. I think it's respectless. And I think when you have the right respect towards what your predecessors have been doing, and if you think what hopefully your successors are going to do, if you have this service mission, then you will have a long-term commitment to your company.
And before we look ahead at the Nestlé company, let's just look at Nestlé right now. We just saw the scale of your company, but even giants like you have setbacks. And this year you reported your weakest annual sales increase in 6 years. What do you see as the primary cause to this right now?
Well, let me say it is true. It's the weakest growth in 6 years. But it was still 4.2% growth on a company that is almost selling 100 billion. So it's 4 billion growth, which is, well, it's not so bad. I mean, there are some other companies just for growth. So let's put things in perspective. But it's still not what we normally expect of this company to be able to deliver. I can give you several reasons which have nothing to do with our management. I personally feel that we had a huge issue in India where we had to withdraw, I mean, just to give you an idea, we had to withdraw 35,000 tons of good, safe food and burn it just because somebody believed that the products were not corresponding quality-wise. Reality proved, and afterwards, and the High Court confirmed that the products were absolutely in perfect state. So that was something which perhaps we were more a victim of circumstances.
Yeah, and the reason I ask, because of course there's these force majeure situation coming up, it's because I like to touch upon the economic crisis with you, and just to hear how you read the situation right now, being a global company as you are. Let's start with Europe. We're barely on the other side of the crisis, and now that Germany, the Eurozone's strongest economy, is it's kind of looking under pressure, and this is Denmark's strongest and biggest export market. In your point of view, do you think that we are headed toward a new setback in the European economy?
No, I must say I'm more confident and I'm much more optimistic than most of the medias are today. You know, if you look at the reality, economic growth between 1980 to 2000 was on an average 2.4%. Okay? Nobody in those years was worried about growth. Now we are growing 3.2%, and everybody says we have an economic crisis. I don't understand that. I think 3.2% is much better than the 2.4% we had between 1980 and 2000. So there is a, I would say, almost artificially created negative perception of the situation. Yes, it could be better. Yes, there were years where we were growing faster. But I can live and I can manage a company when the world economy is growing by 3.2%, frankly speaking.
So we worry too much?
Well, I think there's part of this thing is coming out because of this constant negative headlines that we are receiving. The reality is that even in Europe, we are growing. Now, don't forget one thing. We have a declining population, and we are still growing the economy. Of course, we are not growing 5% and 10% and I don't know what. But if you think about it, within the declining population still grows, that's not so bad. Talking about China.
Yes, that was my next question, because if we look at China right now, it seems like the growth is significantly, let's say, falling. Is it?
But no, let me ask you the question the other way around. You see, China is today, in PPP terms, the biggest economy of the world, about 20 trillion, okay? Bigger than the United States. It is growing by let's say 6.2, 6.5%. So how can we talk about a crisis when the biggest economy of the world is growing by 6.2%? Think about if the United States would be growing 6.2%, would anybody talk about a crisis? No. I prefer to have 6.2% of 20 trillion than to have 12% of a trillion. Okay? So again, it's a perception. It's not true. We are not in an economic crisis. We are not in a recession. At least I don't allow my people to come with an argument like this, trying to justify that they were growing only by 4.2%. I think we have everything there to grow by 5%.
But still, a lot of companies have faced setbacks in net profit in recent years, and so has Nestlé. I just have some figures here. In 2014, you had 14.46 billion Swiss franc, and in 2015, 9.1. Still, seems actually a bit funny talking about setbacks when you have this scale of numbers. But is this a sign of what is changing?
But again, you see, your figures are right. So in our net profit in 2014 was 14 billion, and our net profit in 2015 was 9.8 billion. The difference is that in 2014, we sold a 50% stake in one of a joint venture company, and we made an extraordinary profit of about 5 billion. This has nothing to do with the operating. The operating profit last year was better than the year before. So those are the interpretation of figures, the interpretation of macroeconomic figures, the interpretation of microeconomic figures. It always depends how you present them. And if you are...
Perception is king.
Yes, but you know, don't excavate your own grave with wrong perception.
So, so when I touch upon this and want to talk about challenges, what do you actually see as the biggest challenge for the food industry right now?
The biggest challenge in the food industry right now has to do with what I showed you on the graphic before. There's a paradigm change. People don't want to eat and should not only don't want, should not eat more, they should eat better. That's what really the big paradigm is. At least in the developed market and in big part of the society of the emerging market. We should not forget, however, that we still have close to 1 billion of people who are hungry, who are dying, who have a life expectancy which is as low as I showed you on the graph, because they don't have sufficient caloric coverage. So you have to run, as a food and beverage company, a double strategy. You have to assure that you bring access to an adequate caloric coverage to everybody in the world, and for those who are already eating sufficient, that you start to improve the quality of the nutrients that you're bringing them. That's a challenge.
Today's topic is Next 12, and one market I'd just like to touch upon before we're headed towards the break is America, and I know that Nestlé has high confidence in growth in this market. And an election is coming up. I'd just like to show you this clip.
Hello, who's this?
Congratulations, you're speaking to Donald Trump.
Oh, hello, Donald.
How are you, Hillary? I haven't seen you since my last wedding.
Well, I'm sure I'll see you at the next one.
Anyway, I just finished the GOP debate. As usual, it was fantastic. Everyone loved me. Now look, I know you're about to go out for your interview with Jimmy Fallon, but he's a total lightweight. So I'm going to do him a favor and interview you instead.
That's great. You know how much I love being interviewed.
Yes, this is of course the Jimmy Fallon show. Jimmy Fallon as Donald Trump and Hillary as herself. When you depend so much on growth at the US market, could you tell us who do you trust for the job? The businessman Donald Trump or the politician Hillary Clinton?
Well, I would say the election of the United States is especially interesting because I think it is symptomatic of a society that is a little bit astray. I think you have an enormous part of the population that is extremely frustrated with Washington, with politicians, and they believe this part that a successful, quoted successful businessman like Donald Trump would bring more pragmatism into their life and will make their life better. They have more confidence, which I must say is a sign that they really, really have lost all confidence in the political side. On the other hand, you have a candidate which I think is certainly a model for what is happening in Washington. So either you believe in politicians or you believe more in entrepreneurs, and that's the way how people are going to vote. I mean, that's going to be the answer.
So many challenges for the next 12 months. I'm just thinking, what do you think, these things are out of our hands, but what do you think the CEOs have to pay most attention to towards the next 12?
The next 12 seconds? The next 12 months?
Not seconds, let's take months.
The next 12 months. Well, I think here in Europe, of course, the biggest question mark that we're going to have is, of course, the UK, and this can provoke turbulences. I think it is absolutely almost incredible the timing of the UK talking about leaving Europe. The UK is the only country today within the European Union that has a bigger deficit than what Maastricht allowed them to do. They have a 5.8% deficit. Who is financing it? It's basically the other European markets who had made order in their household, and therefore they have an accident, cash accident, which is financing today the huge deficit of the UK. And then saying, you know, those guys who are helping me and financing me, I don't want to be with them anymore. Well, I don't know whether they have thought this really well through. But that's the biggest issue here in Europe that we're going to have. Worldwide, I would say, I would be, again, I'm an optimistic salesman. I mean, I cannot be otherwise.
So they should actually be more optimistic.
Of course. I mean, look at the great opportunities we have today in Africa, for example. Yeah? I mean, if I just look at it, yes, there is some problem area, but we have 54 states, 39 have a stable democratic system, have a growth rate, economic growth rate, which is bigger and more impressive than all the Asiatic countries. Yeah, and then you have some 14 countries which are a mess. But okay, why don't you invest in the 38 which are fine? Okay, another great opportunity, growth opportunity. So I would say I'm not very much worried. The only thing is that we have this problem here, and then let's see what the Americans have up for us. Will be interesting anyway. Will be a great show. Will be Hollywood. Hollywood at its best, I would say.
Peter, I prepared so many questions for you, but we're running out of time. But I just have a little quiz for you as well. And I'd like to ask you what you think links the following three. We have, I can tell there's actually two things in common. We have the energy drink Red Bull, and then we have the race driver Niki Lauda, and then, of course, you, man on stage, Peter Brabeck-Letmathe.
Austria.
You're Austrian, that's the first one.
Mate Schietz, Red Bull is Austrian, Niki Lauda is Austrian.
Exactly, that's true.
So
and I can tell you the second one, you're all connected to the Formula One, because I know you became chairman. In 2012, Niki Lauda, of course, won the Formula One, and as we just saw with Andy Palmer, Red Bull is also in the Formula One. You've had so many roles in your career. I'm just thinking, how do you find this particular one?
Yeah, I would say this, being chairman of this Formula One, of course, is a privilege, and it's also very entertaining.
I can imagine. It must be one of those dreams that boys have. At the end, the best advice you have ever had and which you would like to share with the audience?
The best advice that I ever received came from our vice chairman when I became CEO. And he said, Peter, I only give you one advice. Don't believe that you are as good as the press is going to write about you in the beginning. But don't believe you are as bad as the press will write when you leave. He was right.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.